There is one project management pitfall that all project managers in the engineering world must be aware of. And in this week's Engineering Management Lessons video, I'm lucky to have with me Matt Kastberg. Matt not only oversees 75 people in his position at Parametrix, but he also is a project manager himself and manages several large projects. So Matt, why don't you share with our audience the biggest project management pitfall and how you try to avoid it or become more aware of it or teach your team members how to deal with it.
Well, I think one of the common things you'll see is scope creep. You have a scope, you have a budget, and then often you'll see where, a client might need a little bit more here and there. And, we like to please our clients. So it's, oh yeah, absolutely, but not understanding that we don't have the budget to do that, and so we get to the end of the project and we don't have enough money. We didn't do a good job of communicating with our client of that change. So I think scope creep, again, it's communication between your project manager, your team, and the client. You got to make sure that there's an understanding of what our scope is and what do we do if, the client wants additional work. You got to make sure that you understand the client's expectations for managing that. And you got to make sure your team knows how to manage that, right? And then you got to make sure you're communicating with your client and your team on a frequent basis to be able to track that and communicate those changes. So I think that's really important. And it's one of those things that you learn to manage better with more experience. As good project managers learn to manage scope creep as they get more experience, they get more training, and they learn some of the things that you can do to kind of communicate that better.
Yeah, and I think the thing about scope creep that a lot of people don't think about, and I think, Matt kind of just made this clear in his comments, is it's something that is very people oriented. You have to have conversations with clients, and it can be very sensitive conversations. So it's not just about the hard scope, schedule, budget of project management. Like right. Matt said, like you want to do well for your client. You want to impress them. You want to keep them happy. So if they ask you to do something, it's a very difficult thing to say to them, listen, I definitely want to help you. We want to do this for you. It's not something that was in our original budget. So I'm going to have to ask you to pay for that. And so I think that is difficult, but I think it's critically important because most projects go over budget because of scope creep, because people are kind of doing things that they're not supposed to be doing. And I do think that Matt's kind of advice for dealing with is the best is that it's just experience. Like I think every time you have to have one of those conversations, you get better at it. And I think at the end of the day, if you can go to a client confidently and express that and explain it, I found in my experiences that the clients are happier with you because they feel like you're in control of the project. It's almost like they're right. Like, man, this is the person I want managing my project. If they're comfortable coming out to me and asking me for this, I'm sure right. Like when they're talking on my behalf with agencies and other people that they are comfortable doing that. So I know it's a very difficult conversation to have the first time you have to have it. But I think, and I'm sure Matt would agree that I think it's just the more you do it and the more you expose people to it. And maybe you could talk about that for a minute, Matt. How do you get people on your team to get better at this?
Well, I think mentoring, again, going back to that mentoring theme, providing that support that they need, doing project reviews, being involved with kickoff meetings as a leader, supervisor, manager, with various project managers that maybe are less experienced. And just providing some pointers on how to do that. But, in my experience, I remember, the first project I was like solely responsible for managing. And it was when I was in the survey group and we had a contractor that, contractors are famous for, keep the budget tight and give me more and more and more. And we were actually setting a grid for a multi-level medical facility. And our scope said we would set the grid one time, but they needed it every time they changed one little aspect of that deck. So that ended up being like 3 or 4 times. And so I had to communicate that with this contractor, and it was terrifying. You know, they said, "Hey, you should have known. You know, when you put the scope together, you should have known that we would need it more than once." And today, it's really easy for me to have those conversations. And like you said, I think clients appreciate it because they know, hey, this is someone that is a good project manager, right? This is someone I want managing my projects because they're doing an effective job of communicating and managing that scope creep. And I know before you go spend the money, what it's going to cost, or what the impact might be. And so I think it, like, going back to that experience thing, but I think things that we can do as managers and leaders is just stay engaged, provide that support, that mentorship, so people can learn.
Awesome. All right. Well, a big thanks to Matt Kastberg from Parametrix. If you enjoyed our video for today, please consider subscribing to our channel here. We put out videos like this to help AEC professionals become better managers and leaders. We'll see you next week.